Okay, great. Good morning. I'd like to call to order the December 4, 2021 Lake Washington School Board study session. Let the record reflect that all board members, except Director Sage, who I believe is on her way, are present in person. Oh, we're getting that set up. I'm just going to keep going. We'd like to welcome Leah Choi as our newly elected board member, and Trisha Lubach, okay, thank you, District Leadership Development Director from the Washington State School Directors Association, who will be assisting the board in our annual self-assessment process. Under the Open Public Meetings Act, the Public Records Act, and the proclamations issued thereunder, the prohibition on in-person public meetings is extended, but there's an exemption for public meetings that comply with the guidelines for business meetings found in the miscellaneous venues guidance. That guidance states that as of June 30, 2021, governing bodies of public agencies may host in-person public meetings under the Open Public Meetings Act with no restrictions on capacity and no physical distancing requirements, but all applicable face covering requirements must be followed. The board will notify the public of the location of its meetings through the Board Meetings tab on Board Docs on the LWSD website. At this time, it is planned that all board meetings scheduled in December and the January 10 study session and board meeting will be held remotely unless there are changes in the guidance provided. Board meetings, study sessions, and special board meetings will continue to be live streamed on the LWSD website. If you are unable to live stream the meeting, you may call to listen, and that phone number is 425-936-2813, conference ID 37127. You're also welcome to email the board at boardmembers@lwsd.org, and those emails are distributed to every board member. The only topic for today's study session is the board self-assessment. Dr. Holman, could you introduce the topic, please?
Absolutely, and just want to recognize the board for allocating time to spend reviewing your self-assessment, which allows you to develop goals around improvement, knowing that as a board you've been committed to ongoing growth and development for a number of years, which is also represented by your recognition as a board of distinction. So with that, I'll hand it off to Trisha to walk us through our agenda today.
Great, thank you. Is that on now?
There you go.
Okay, great. Well, welcome. I'm very happy to be with all of you today. I appreciate you inviting me in. I'll give a little bit of background about myself. I'm the Director of Leadership Development at WASDA, and saw many of you at annual conference, which was wonderful to see you and give you the opportunity to have some leadership development, professional development there. In addition to being with WASDA for the last 10 years, I have also been a local school board director, so I have 16 years of school director experience as well. So I really understand the work and the challenges and some of the issues that you all grapple with as school board members, trying to govern your districts in a way that meets the needs of every student. So I'm really happy to be here today. You've got the little guy up there giving you a little bit of inspiration. For all of you being here early at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning, we appreciate that. So a couple things I'd like to start with. One of the things, I've had a chance to just go around. Most of you I've met, those of you who I hadn't, I introduced myself to earlier. But I'd like you to share with me just something you're hoping to learn and contribute today, because all of you have the capacity to learn something and also contribute quite a bit today. So, Eric, I'll maybe start with you. I know. I guess you're the board chair, so you do have the opportunity to pass that off to someone else if you'd like.
That's right. That's right. Okay, good point. Okay, Leah, go ahead.
Oh, great.
No, I'm kidding. I'll go. Learn. Okay, so I guess what I would like to learn is we have a governance process that our board operates under, and I find it interesting to think critically about our governance process in relation to other potential governance processes. And I don't say that as a, to suggest that we abandon ours, but I think it helps for me to think about why we do the things we do when we talk about in relation to other ways of operating as a board. So I guess I'd like to learn comparatively of what different governance processes can be used by a board. What was the second part of the prompt? What I hope to add?
Contribute.
Hope to contribute. Okay. Oof. I mean, I just did right there, right? Didn't I just?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
That's great. Okay, are we going to your right or to your left?
Yeah, Leah. That was sorry, I was being glib. I hope, I hope to contribute my honest experience of serving on the board for the last few years. We haven't had a board self-assessment for a while. So that's what I hope to contribute.
Thank you very much. Okay. Siri, would you like to go next? Sure. We won't make Leah go.
I was expecting Leah to go. I kept throwing her that way. Okay. So I guess what I hope to learn is sort of where we as a board see where we are at and have the opportunity to improve and actually build on where things are good and strengthen those. And what I can add to this, I guess, I do appreciate Eric's comment in regards to my experience of doing so and being on the board. That's a big piece. And honesty through it, I think that's important. And then I guess, willingness to listen and hear new things.
Thank you. Chris?
I'm going to take the two questions out of order. Something I want to contribute, well, I actually have something I hope I don't contribute too much of, and that is skepticism. I am not a huge fan of self-assessment. I'm a huge fan of assessment. So I'm hoping to learn what value self-assessment has for us.
Thank you. Fair enough. Mark?
Over the last 8 years, I've tried to figure out the simple way, a 2-minute or even a 30-second way of explaining to constituents what policy governance means and what the difference is between it and other forms and why it works best for them. I don't have the elevator speech yet. I'm not even sure I have the Gettysburg Address version of it. And I'd like to be able to better, succinctly explain to them. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out in the public. There's a lot of, there's probably about as many misconceptions in this room as there are out in the public, but that's beside the point. So I want to make sure that when we leave here that I can find a way, and like I said, about a 50-word, here's what it is, here's what it means to you, and here's why it's better than other ways. What do I hope to contribute? I get a ton of input from a lot of folks around the district, and I hope to bring those thoughts to the meeting today.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Leah?
So probably what I'd hope to learn is a little bit more of the dynamics and how this board functions, as well as a lot of history, being brand new. What I'd hope to contribute would probably be a new perspective to somebody who's never served on a school board and is at this point just a member of the community. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. John?
So I think to Chris's point, I'm also a huge fan of assessment, and whether the self-assessment is a formalized process or informal process, assessment data helps us improve our practice, whether or not that self-assessment is formal. So I guess I would offer that as we are always self-assessing. And we have all sorts of mechanisms for assessing externally. And this is really the application of taking all of that data and then saying, how are we willing to apply that to our practices to improve? And so I'm excited about that. For me, working with this board is a privilege, because this board has continued to demonstrate a willingness to want to grow and learn. And I think that's a critical part of board superintendent positive working relationship. The fact that these folks are willing to serve as publicly elected school board members, I think, is a testament to kind of their character. But also, I truly believe that publicly elected school boards have a critical role in public education, because it truly provides the community's voice in the process of educating community students. And so for me, this conversation is all about elevating the board's voice and governance in their role in leading the school district. So what can I offer? Hopefully I bring the operational perspective, the executive leadership perspective, and honesty and transparency.
Great, thank you very much. Getting all of your thoughts down. So, great. So all of you have an agenda in front of you, and so certainly our purpose today is to take a look at the self-assessment, but also not just to look at it, but to really work with it. Because the beauty of you having had several years of longitudinal data now, where you've taken this, is that it really gives you some added perspective. And speaking to specifically, some skepticism around self-assessments, which I think is really fair. It's one type of assessment for you, similar to how, students used to only be assessed by others through tests, but over the years, there has been some element of adding that, asking students, how do you think you're doing? And that has been a positive outcome for students to be able to think about that themselves. And the same is true of boards. You get assessments from the public all the time, whether you ask for them or not, right? And this is one way to really dig into some of your own data. So there are a couple things that I want to share with you. So if you take a look at the agenda that we have today, we're going to spend this morning, really the first 2 hours, unpacking the board self-assessment, because the self-assessment report itself has no value unless all of you as a team discuss what it means to you. What did we say? What did we mean by this? What does this data tell us about ourselves? And how can we learn and grow from it? So it's really the power is in the conversations that you have. So I encourage you to really dive into those. Be afraid to really dig into them and think about, what does this mean for us? So we're going to start with that this morning. We'll be doing that in a variety of different ways. We're going to be pairing you up, giving you the opportunity to work in small groups and then come back into whole group. So that's where we'll start this morning. We're going to have a break, hopefully at 10:30, because that's a good time to then have a break. Then after that, we'll move into some goal setting around what you have unpacked this morning around the self-assessment, and also taking a look at your strategic plan. How does your self-assessment, how do the things that you talked about earlier in the morning connect with your role within the strategic plan? So we'll move into that later on in the morning. And then we're going to end with what we call a success protocol, which is short. It really gives you the opportunity to talk about what you need from each other. So I'll just stop for a moment and offer if anybody has any questions or thoughts at this point, or needs another cup of coffee to get moving. Yeah, there is coffee over there and water, so feel free to grab any of that. Hi, Cassandra. Welcome. Nice to see you. So I'm going to dive in. Couple things to show you. This is behind me, so I think I can follow it here. In terms of really thinking about the board self-assessment, I want to give you a little bit of background on it. We have worked with some researchers from Montana over the last, I guess it's been now about 13 years. And WASDA's board self-assessment is the only one in the nation that is statistically valid and reliable, and has gone through that process of validation. So we have, over the years, we've had the survey results connected with student outcomes in districts. So they have compared how do boards assess themselves through the board self-assessment, and how does that compare to student academic outcomes. So I do want to clarify that. Obviously, you all know there are a lot of things that are not assessed in terms of student success by the state. That's one of the things that's frustrating. How do you really fully assess a student? But if you're looking strictly at the data that's easy to grab, which is state assessment data, that's what it's compared with. And what they found in comparing those two in Washington State is that the boards of high-performing districts behave very differently than the boards of low-performing districts. And so that seems somewhat intuitive on one level, and yet on another level, you think about how, it's a distal relationship between the board and the students in many ways. But this is some work that actually originally came out of the Lighthouse studies out of Iowa. So any of you who've sort of studied boardsmanship and the work of boards will be familiar. That was really seminal research around the question of, does it matter what boards do for students? Does it make any difference? Another study that came out was looking at low-performing boards and low student achievement. And this one was really interesting. This research was based on observational data. So Lee and Edens are two researchers who attended hundreds of board meetings. And they listed what they saw in the board meetings, and there were a number of factors that they had that they could assess boards on. And then they compared them to, again, student achievement scores. And this is what they found, that those districts that had low performance, low academic performance in the district were more likely to have board meetings that were less orderly, less time spent on student achievement, not listening respectfully to each other or to people speaking, advancing their own agenda, less good working relationships. Don't love that wording, but their working relationships were not positive within the governance team. Fewer members relied on the superintendent for advice or input. A member other than the chair took excessive time in terms of talking within the meeting. And then there was less focus on policy items. So again, we're building some research around, does what you all do every day matter for students? So this brings us to the Washington School Board Standards. I think probably most of you have seen this before, but these were standards that were developed back in 2009. Again, a lot of it based on the Iowa Lighthouse studies, as well as really what was available at the time, which, 12, almost 13 years ago, there was a different level of information available about boards and their work than there is now. Just a little bit of information for you. WASDA is currently updating the Washington School Board Standards and taking really the topic of equity in education. Received a fairly light touch back in 2009. So that's part of the refresh that we're doing and will launch in 2022. So you can watch for that. The reason I talk about the Washington School Board Standards is that the indicators in there are actually the questions in the board self-assessment. So that's what the board self-assessment is it's the connection of how do you feel individually your board is or is not applying the Washington School Board Standards. Just make sure we're on the same one. I'm going to go ahead. So these are the 5 core principles, and there are about 10 to 12 indicators under each one of them, and those are the questions that you answered on the self-assessment. So the first one is responsible school district governance. The second is communication of and commitment to high expectations for student learning. Third is creating conditions district-wide for student and staff success. The fourth is holding the district accountable for student learning. And the last one is engagement of the community in education. Did I end up on the right spot? There we go. Okay, good. Nothing like having a presentation behind you. So again, as our Montana researchers took a look at how do the answers on the board self-assessment correlate with student outcomes, they found a number of things. And I'll let you know both, so Texas, Oregon, let's see, Arizona, and Minnesota also use our board self-assessment. So they, and also some districts in Montana. So our researchers have been able to take a look at not only Washington State's correlations with the self-assessment and student outcomes, but also from the other states. And their research has been really consistent, the research results. In some cases, there's a switch between 1 and 2 or 2 and 1, but overall they've found very consistent results from the boards. And so this is what they've seen in terms of high student achievement boards. And these are listed actually in order. So these are some of the questions that you answered, and the question would have been, does your board, through policies and actions, communicate high expectations for all students? And that one turned out to have the strongest correlation between high student achievement with high student achievement. So again, I think it's interesting, that one's really about communicating those high expectations. You can look through the rest of those. I'll let you just take a moment to read through them. Did you get through them all? Okay. Give me a thumbs up when you're done. Okay, I think I saw you all. Again, none of these fall specifically within one or two of the 5 standard areas, although there are some groupings within them that are have stronger correlations than others. So really, this is the upshot. School board actions matter. Oh, that's right. There you go. There we go. So when you're addressing factors within your control, school boards can create environments where social injustices are overcome and every student achieves at high levels, even in a pandemic. It gets more challenging for sure. But what the board does matters. So I'm not going to spend much time lecturing at you today. This is almost the end of it, in fact. That's the good part. But I wanted to set up for you why it matters what we're doing today and why your work matters and why going through the board self-assessment can make a difference in terms of both your own performance and what that looks like for students. In addition, there are some individual school board standards. And we'll go through those later on in the day, but I think I'm going to stick right now. Let me see if I can get this. Oh, I can't get back, can I? How do I go backwards on this? Do you know? I do. So if you could go back to slide 6.
Is that the one you wanted?
Yeah, no, slide 6 if you could. Sorry about that.
Is that it?
Nope, back. There you go. Perfect. Thank you very much. So there we go. I don't know, you'll get your steps in today if you're doing that. So this is really where we're going to start. Okay, and so what I would like you to do is I want to walk through a couple of pieces of information that you have in front of you. First of all, does anybody have any questions or comments on what we just ran through? I know it was just a very quick overview of. Okay. Absolutely, be happy to do that for you. Yeah, sure. Actually, John has them.
Yes, I do.
John has them because he's running the show for us today. So here's what we're going to do. There are a couple pieces of information, and I want to walk through them with you. All of you have the board self-assessment, giant document here, 42 pages. Yes, you answered all of these questions. So I think this survey was taken maybe a couple months ago. Do you recall, Siri?
I think it was March. Yeah, I think it was about 6 months.
Oh, was it back in March? Okay, okay. Which probably isn't that different, maybe then, I don't know. It would be interesting to see if it would be different today, but the results are fairly consistent over time. So I just want you to be aware of that. You have that. The other document that you have in front of you is what's called a ranking report. Let me see if I have that copy with me. It looks like this. It says Board Self-Assessment Survey Score Ranking. Looks like this. It's 5 pages. Everybody have that? This is a little bit of a cheat sheet, and I'll tell you how to use it. And then additionally, I'm going to hand out some worksheets for you, okay? Nothing like coming to school on Saturday and getting a worksheet, right? And this worksheet can be used as a guide. You do not have to follow it word for word. Use it as a tool, really just as a tool for yourself. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do 3 rounds of conversation. So it'll be small group conversation. Some of you will be in pairs, and then I think we have 1 triad, since we have an odd number of people. So 2 pairs and 1 triad. And the 3 rounds are this. The first one is really digging in and looking at where are some areas where you as a board identified some strengths. You believe these are some areas of strength for yourself as a board. These are things we think we do pretty well. We really focus on. And then the second round is going to be where are the areas where we didn't find as much strength within our board. Maybe those are areas where we'd like to set some goals for improvement. They might also just be things that you're not focusing on right now. And in some cases, that might be okay. This has not been a normal 2 years. And so you can't do all the things in the middle of a pandemic. So perhaps you set some things aside to focus on other things, and that's okay, but I will want you to really dig in and think about that. Are these things that we really should be focusing on right now, or are those things that made sense for us to set aside for the current time? So that's the second round. The third one is rainbow round. It sounds more exciting than it is. Those are those areas where your board had a real divergence of input. Some of you thought, hey, we do a good job at this. Some of you thought, we're okay. Some of you said, no, we really don't do this at all. So those are the ones where there's a real divergence, and you want to have some discussions around why is that? Is that concerning to us? Is it an area where we want to set some goals? Or again, is that one of those things that is just how it is during current circumstances? So we're going to spend about 30 to 35 minutes on each round. You'll have about 15 minutes to talk with each other as pairs or triads. And then we'll spend about 20 minutes sharing out. So if Cassandra and Siri are a pair, then after the 15 minutes where they've talked and written some notes, then when we come back together, we'll go around, and their group would have a chance to share out, and we'll collect all of that data. I really encourage you to write down some of the things that you talk about, because that'll help you remember what to share out with the group. I guarantee you'll have some things that are similar, but you'll also have some observations that are different from each other, and that's the value of having some small group conversations. Okay, take a break from talking. Yes, John?
Is the collated data the 5-year averages, or is this based on just the 2021 responses from the board?
Yeah, so let's take a look at that. So take a look at page 3. So ask your question to me again, please.
So this document here,
Yes.
is this based on a 5 data point average, or is this just the 2021 responses?
Great question. Only 2021 responses.
thank
So
you.
this is this year. And so I'll tell you how to use this. One of the things you might want to start with is, in fact, let's take a look at it just as a full group right now. Take a look at page 3, which says at the top, the framework for governance aggregate data. And this is your longitudinal data. So you have taken the board self-assessment in 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2021. So take a look at this just for a minute. Think about what you see here. Any thoughts you'd like to share? On this, on the longitudinal data. Yeah.
A lot of green and blue. Sorry, that is a statistical summary of that page of data.
A lot of green and blue, yeah, which the green and blue means you as a board believe you do many of these things always or most of the time. Yeah. Yep, great. Absolutely. What else do you see?
Prior to 2021, you didn't really see never?
Great, good, another good observation. So prior to this year, there weren't a lot of responses that said, we never do this. Could be a lot of reasons for that, yeah, you'll have some time to dive into that. Siri, do you see something here?
As I look at the standards, standard 5 tend to have the lowest where we were all in blue or green,
Right.
and that's consistent through the years.
So standard 5, engaging the local community and representing the values and expectations they hold for their schools is the area where you've rated yourselves the lowest consistently, including this year. How about things that changed from 2018 to 2021?
So 2018 was my first year as a board director, and so I'm going to guess that a lot of the I don't knows were from me. I don't remember
Sure,
how
that-
I ranked it, but
that's
I'm
very
going
common.
to guess that was me.
I think the 2016 I don't knows were me. Yeah.
16 in standard 3, 10%, 12%, and 9% don't know. That's new standard.
Thank you, Chris. I accept full potential responsibility. Oh, yeah, I honestly did not know, being a couple months in. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, the I don't knows don't count against your board. The I don't knows are a to-do list of these are the things we need to ensure that our new school board member or members learn about. And when Leah takes it next year, right, because you'll take this in 2022, there will be some items in black that say I don't know, that she'll probably be the reason why those were answered. And you'll want to take a look at those and ask her. So we see an I don't know here. Is this something that the board needs to provide you with some more information about? So it really is a good to-do list for your new school board members. But longtime school board members can sometimes have an I don't know also. Even longtime board members sometimes don't know what they don't know. And as they learn more, they realize they don't know what they thought they knew. It's just the nature of the work. Any other observations before we move into small groups? Yes, Mark.
We have a very high opinion of ourselves, put it that way. And rightly or wrongly, I don't know. And I think it goes back to the phrase that we don't know what we don't know. And that's where the self-assessment, I think, is useful because, as Chris indicated, there's a lot of blue and green. And it may be reality, that may just be our perception, I don't know. And I'd rather have it be a reality than a perception.
Yeah, you'll be able to dig into some of those details once you're working on in small groups. So good observations there. Okay, anyone else? So let me tell you how you're going to use these things. So one of the pieces, have all of you had a chance to look over this report yet? Or some of you haven't? Some of you haven't.
I looked at it.
Yeah, okay. And no, there's no problem there. You will, for the first 2 rounds, use this document mainly as backup. So if you want to really dig in and take a look at some specific questions, how you answered it, you can do that. what you'll primarily use during the first two rounds is your score ranking. So what this does is this provides a list from the first page to the last page of the average score that you gave each question. So if you take a look at the first page, you'll see all of these along the left-hand side are in green. So that's probably fairly self-explanatory. These are the areas where you rated yourselves the highest. Again, just to John's point, during the 2021 board self-assessment. So you can see they are primarily on the first page, and then a couple of them move over onto the second page. So it's basically anything that you gave a score higher than 3.6 as an average, okay? So those are the areas where I would start looking in your first round about where are your areas of strength. If you go to the very last page, you're gonna see the inverse. So page 5 of 5, you have some of these that are identified in red. These are the areas that had the lowest average among all of them. Now, I'm not sure why the one at the top of the page, which is also a 3.0, wasn't identified in red. I would go ahead and circle that one too, as well as the one on the very bottom of page 4. So take a look at any of those that are 3.0 or lower. Those are the areas that you rated yourselves the lowest. So take a look back at the first page. Let's look at the very first one at the top. So let's just run across what the numbers mean. So the average, that's self-explanatory. It's the average score that you all gave. Since the average is a 4, you probably realize that means all of you gave yourselves a 4 on this. So you can see the minimum was a 4, the maximum was a 4, the standard deviation was 0. The question is question number 10. So if you want, it's not going to be interesting for you to look at this one because you all answered it the same. But as you get down to some of the others, particularly the areas where there's some lack of cohesiveness, or the areas where you rated yourselves lower, you may want to look at, well, what did it really look like? How did we score ourselves? So that'll be helpful with the question number. And then, of course, the middle is what was the indicator, what was the question. And then the next column is the standard. Which standard did it fall within? And so again, you can look up here. So you can see that one, question 10 was in standard 1, which is responsible school district governance. And that's listed over here on the right-hand side. Okay, yes, go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, so John, getting back to your question about whether this is this year's or all years, the answer has to be all years, because otherwise there would be nothing that ended in .72. If it was only this year, there are only 5 votes. Divided by 5, it would have to be 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, or 0.8. So these are definitely 4 years averaged.
Is that right?
It's absolutely certain.
Oh.
And you just can't have an average with 5 votes that doesn't end in 0.20, 0.40,
Okay.
0.60. So these are 4 year.
That's good to know. I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, even without the don't. Yeah, you're right. They do subtract out the don't knows, but it still doesn't wind up. You can't get a 3.76 versus 3.75. That's just an impossible number, unless it's all 4 years. Anyway, the other thing I actually wanted to provide you as feedback before it drives me crazy
Sure.
looking at it. Take the standard deviation column out of this. For anybody who speaks math, that just infuriates us. And I'll give you a reason.
Sure.
Your second question, 3.78 with a standard deviation of 0.42. 2 standard deviations is the 95% confidence interval. So 3.78 minus 0.82, that puts it below a 3. That's not statistically different from our second to last question, where we got a 2.52 plus or minus 2 times 0.79. Translation, the standard deviations mean nothing. This is qualitative data, not quantitative data. Let's not pretend it is. Anyway, having gotten that off my chest, I don't need to worry about saying that for the rest of the afternoon.
Excellent,
So.
thank you. I appreciate that input. So that is news to me that this is not this year's. That was not the data that I requested be pulled. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Also, it makes me really glad we call the third round the rainbow round and not the standard deviation round. Yeah. Okay, so we'll stick with the rainbow. How's that sound?
That would have been a showstopper, right?
That's right. Woo, I'm
Chris would have had to step out.
I'm so glad I stuck with rainbow. Okay. I think that actually sets us up really well for our next event. How does that sound? Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that. There's always somebody in the group who knows so much about math and data that it makes my head explode. So I appreciate that. So we are going to start. Let's see. I've got a whole mess of papers in front of me, and I'm going to let you know what your first grouping of pairs is. So to start out with, I'm going to pass this around, and you can take, they are collated. So you're going to get one that is green, one that is red, and one that is orange. Probably can figure that out, right? Go ahead and take your 3 pages and pass them along, and I will let you know what your first pairing is.
I also want to let the public know that's viewing this, we set this up to provide typical access to a meeting. And so the public will be able to view and hear this portion of the meeting when the board breaks out into small groups, just as if they were breaking out into small groups and you were actually in the room. You wouldn't really hear their conversation. You may hear the buzz of multiple conversations. And so you may be able to see all of the conversations because the camera view will be on the whole room, but you won't be actively hearing the small group conversations. But when the board returns to this space, you will be able to hear the dialogue about those conversations.
Great, thank you very much for that clarification. So here, here's your first group of pairs. So we're going to, and you can move around wherever is comfortable for you to work together. You're going to be talking, recording what your conversation is about so that you can bring it back to the whole group. The first pair is Eric and Mark. Second pair is Cassandra and Chris. And the third pair is Siri, John, and Leah. So you can move into those groups. And again, there's some instructions on the worksheet, but essentially, here's what I'd like you to think about. Where this, again, first round is on strengths. What do we view as our strengths? Why? Are they grouped in 1 or 2 standard areas? You know, looking up here at what we have behind me, do they fall within one of those 5 or fall within 2 of those 5? Take a look. Whatever your observations are about those strengths. One of the reasons we start with strengths is because it's very, very natural to look at something like this and go right to the areas you need to improve. And that is not where you should start. You need to start with where you think you have strength as a team. And how can we use those strengths and build on those strengths in order to inform us on the next round, which is areas where perhaps we'd like to learn more, do more, improve our performance, whatever that looks like. Focus on that more. But starting with your strengths is really the best way. And it's hard for us as humans to do that. Okay? So any questions before you go off into your pairs or other observations? Okay, I think we're ready to go then. So we'll start out with about 15 minutes for you on this first round. Again, your pairs are Eric and Mark, Cassandra and Chris, and then the triad is Siri, John, and Leah. Okay, great. Well, I know that that time went really fast for all of you. So, which is, I think you can understand why the value of this is really in the discussions that you have around it. So I'm going to take notes as you all share out what your groups talked about. If there's, if you're the second or the third group to share out and there's something that you all noticed that the previous group talked about, just mention, we also noticed that. And then that's all you need to say about it, unless there are some additional insights or thoughts that you want to add. But definitely, this is an opportunity to add on to those who've talked before. So I will take notes that I'll get back to you afterwards so that you have those all collected. You, of course, are welcome to take notes too. So let's see. Siri's to my left. So Siri, you worked with the triad. You worked with Leah and Dr. Holman. So do you want to start first with, and when I say Siri, I actually mean you're the group of three. So however you all, if you made any plans about how to share that out, go ahead and.
We just missed the plan.
Excellent. I will just sit back and let you execute it.
And it was me. So with that, I think our discussion as we looked at that is that standard 3 appeared to be where the strength lied pretty strongly in regards to where we were in a pretty cohesive agreement as a board. And our thought was that really spoke to the fact that that was one of the strengths of coherent governance and the parts of it that we follow that sort of align to that, to current policies and practices that we have. So continuing to do that as we go through. The other piece we noticed was standard, which question was that, John? 46? Which is around the monitoring of the operations of the district. And when you think about that, our OEs are exactly that. The operational expectations are about that. Yet, we don't say we always do that. And so the question around that is how do we strengthen that process so that we are more effectively utilizing our policy process that's already there so that we all believe that works as a monitoring of our operations. So we talked about as we move to the summary assessment and really trying to do that piece of the process, that perhaps is one of those places we can strengthen it. So I'll stop there and see if there's anything else you want to add, Leah or John. Okay.
And Siri, you said that you identified standard 5 as the area. Is that of strength? Is that right?
3.
3. Okay. I thought maybe I got that wrong. Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Cassandra and Chris, would you like to go next?
So Chris is the note taker. I'll weigh in after he does his thing.
Like heck, you go first.
This looks like a sharing where both of you do some sharing. How's that sound?
I think you're going to have to tell me what you wrote if you want me to go first, Chris.
All right. Sorry. Well, we agreed that Area 3 was a clear strength. And for us, conditions district-wide for student and staff success, one of the things that both of us kind of shook our heads at and the COVID year, until we brought the kids back, is this extraordinary experience where nobody would have done that on purpose, even in retrospect. Even we know there are some good things that are going to come out of it, but no, it sucked, frankly. And yet we didn't consider our performance to have sucked, which was an interesting finding for us. And it was the conversation for the two of us turned to, well, why didn't we ding ourselves in standard 3 for that year? And I think we've got a decent answer for that.
So one of the things that we discussed was nobody had a stellar year in 2020 or 2021, honestly.
Nobody statewide.
Yeah, nobody stood up and said, this is the standard, if you all follow this, you're gonna make it. And when we were hearing from all these other districts in our state, and we saw what we were able to accomplish, it was oftentimes a lot more than other districts were able to. And so in that sense, knowing how our peers and our neighbors and even statewide were doing, I think that's potentially why we all rated ourselves a little bit higher.
I mean, there's absolute scoring and there's relative scoring, and it's clear that we think relative to our compatriots around the state. And we didn't feel like we had done a terrible job, which I will say that with an eye on it, but overall the data suggests that we think that.
And this all being qualitative, this is how we feel about it.
Right. So with that as a start, then it was sort of like, well, okay, gosh, are we the Lake Wabigon School Board? Because if you look across all 5 categories, we're 80 to 90% blue and green for everything. And so how are we going to tease useful stuff out of telling ourselves that we're above average on all fronts? Which both of us agree that we're very interested in getting to the rainbow round. But it's...
There were also some things in Standard 3 mostly that we looked at as, is this the role of the board, or was this really more the role of the superintendent? Because we follow the coherent policy governance, which may be very different than other districts around the state or even the country. And so some things weren't really in our wheelhouse, and perhaps that influenced our decision, because John was doing a great job.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll stop there to leave space for group number 3.
Yeah, so a couple observations on that. I think you hit on the idea of grading yourselves on the curve this year, which I think that's a really interesting observation. And we'll come back to that idea of, is this the board's role or not? Because the other part, I think, of grading yourselves on the curve, which is, probably something all boards did last year. The other thing they did is boards delved into operational issues in a way that they never have done before, shouldn't have done before, maybe shouldn't have in this past year. But again, we were all figuring it out and still are as we go along. So.
Absolutely, and I would not say that remote learning was a success for very many students statewide. Some of them thrived, and it was the best thing, but that percentage seems to be much smaller than percent of students who are doing okay in person.
Yeah.
Great. Go ahead, Chris. Were you?
No, sorry, I was just going to say rah. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, great. Excellent observations. Okay, so the last group was Mark and Eric.
I'll prattle on for a little bit, and then you can say something pithy at the end. Okay. We similarly recognized the strengths were mostly clustered around principles 3 and 1, so creating conditions for district-wide success, student success, and responsible school governance. And I think that, when I think about how we've operated, this board has always been focused on student success and achievement. And when all of our conversations are, I think we are very disciplined and always focusing back on outcomes for students and not some of the maybe other things that can come into the room that are not focused on that. So that did not surprise me looking at the data. Other things, I think sort of a strength of this board that comes through is we are, or we believe us to be, and I believe us to be, pretty disciplined in terms of how we operate as a board. And I think that's sort of touching upon what we've heard from the other groups. I think we think about that sort of, you often think about that comparatively to other, how other local municipalities and boards operate. But I do think I think that is a strength, and that we are, as a board, and that does carry through the district, pretty disciplined in our process. And then the last thing that came through was a lot of these strengths are, I think we called them sort of internal focused, of monitoring looking inward as a district and monitoring our performance. The obvious correlate for that is that maybe some of the weaknesses are more the external things, but right now we're focused on the strengths. And I do think that is a strength, and that is something worth recognizing, because that is important. Mark, what I missed?
Well, Eric's right that we focus on our internal, and it's almost as if we're focusing on making sure the trains run on time. And to be quite frank, that's really, to me, more of the staff's job to make sure the trains are running on time. Our job really is to make sure it's a quality ride. And I'm not sure if we always succeed in that. And I know we're focusing on strengths, but I want to be able to make our strengths honest strengths. And as I said earlier, we have a very high opinion of ourselves. And to a great degree, there's reason to be so. We've got very high-performing students, but I tend to think that the high-performing students, that's more a result of high-performing teachers than it is. We can set all the policies we want, but if they're not teaching well, and those kids aren't having what they need, then there's a disconnect. We discussed also the attention paid to the budget, and we'd given ourselves high grades for monitoring of the budget. And I think we do that from a global sense, but when it comes down to line items and comparing it to our priorities, our policy priorities, I wonder if we really dig that deep, or we just look at the global figures, if you will. And since, given the fact that we are financially a stable district, we aren't struggling financially, I think there's a tendency to do that. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But at the same time, if we say that our primary focus is equity, how are we spending those dollars in equity? Are we spending them on books to tell us how to be equitable? Are we spending them on programs to ensure equity with students? And a lot of that, I realize it's a very murky line between administrative then and policy in that respect. Because when you start looking at the budget, for comparing it to the priorities and the policy priorities, then you're really kind of making it a very murky line between the two. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it makes it perhaps more difficult then for staff. I don't know. Or maybe, to be quite frank, it doesn't make it more difficult, because if we focus, perhaps they would have a better sense of our intentions than they currently do. I don't know.
I think you gave us a great segue into our next round.
Can I say one more thing that Mark touched
Please.
on? I'm glad
Yeah,
he did.
go ahead, Eric.
And that is, this community, I think by virtue of that, this board does have there's a culture of expecting high achievement within our district. And I think that because of that then plays out in a lot of the things that are strengths for the board. But I think that starts with the community. And then as members of that community, I think we share that expectation, I guess, of high achievement.
So that's an area where you feel like the board is responsive to community expectations?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, great. Okay, good, thank you. Any other comments on that before we'll have a little bit of time at the end to sort of do a wrap-up on all of them. Okay, so great, we're gonna move on to the next one. Next one is your red worksheet. And so these are opportunities for growth, or they may be opportunities for refocus now or later. Again, we're in somewhat unusual times, obviously now. So as you look at these, you're gonna wanna look at the questions where you rated yourselves the lowest. Think about, do you see some patterns? Were they grouped mainly within one or two standard areas? That'll be, I think, an important thing to look at. Are there common themes among some of the questions where you rated yourselves lower? And then lastly, think a little bit about, can you use these areas of opportunity to grow and improve as a board? And maybe are some of these just simply areas that you've had to set aside over the last almost 2 years because of the pandemic? And if so, what are your thoughts about when you might be able to return to those? Okay, any questions on those directions? Okay, you guys are pros now because you've already done it once. So here are the groupings. So Cassandra and Siri, you are one group. Eric, Chris, and Leah are the second group, and Mark and John are the third. And so we'll have until about, let's see, probably about 9:48. How's that? About 14 minutes? I know, we're getting exact. Yes, and so if you look at your ranking report, you'll want to look at those that were on the last couple of pages, the ones that scored 3.0 and below.
Okay, excellent.
Yep, thanks for the clarification. I'll use my microphone voice to bring you back in. That time together goes really fast, doesn't it? Yeah.
I believe I've only smashed the gavel once, and that was when,
Yeah.
Do you want to use the gavel now, Eric? Have an opportunity. What's that?
he had to use the restroom. Yeah. Maybe.
Okay, we're going to bring ourselves back together here. Everybody have a chance for a short break? Coffee, water, all of the above? Okay, great. So we are going to talk a little bit about what your conversations were around areas where you rated yourselves the lowest, potentially opportunities for growth or refocus. Who wants to start this time? Which group? Great, Eric's group.
The theme that we identified through all of these was the word communicate and communication. What was interesting is I think our discussion around that, and probably my thinking about speaking for myself when I did this, was more thinking about district communication as opposed to the board's communication. But I do also think that as a board, that's also an area for growth too. And maybe there's some space where there's a distinction, I think, between district communication and board communication, but I also think that those are one and the same in some respects too. So anyway, that was the clear theme that fell out, and we had discussions around other things, but that was really the crux of it.
Can your group talk a little bit more about that distinction? Like, what does district communication look like versus what would board communication look like? And how does the board do that given OPMA restrictions and things like that?
Sure, I'll try. Chris, go ahead, rather than me.
Well, when you're talking about expectations, I mean, this is something where there's an opportunity for growth. If you're able to score it, that means that there's something there. You've decided on a metric. And the next question is this a needle that the board is going to solve it themselves, or is this a needle where the board is going to tell someone else that this is a problem they need to fix? And clarifying expectations in that realm, what's the board's immediate problem and what is the board considering a problem for the district? That matters. And an example of that is something, I mean, this is the year that Leah's presence is incredibly valuable because she's someone who's been in the community and doesn't know what the board thinks it's doing. She knows what the board seems to be doing and what the district seems to be doing. And the example that she brought up, which is, I think, the perfect example for this, is kindergarten registration. Every generation, every year, there's a new generation of parents who haven't had a kid go through kindergarten registration before. How do you make sure that they get their kids registered on time? This is a communication problem for the district. Is it a board problem? Yes and no. It is a board problem that if the district doesn't do it well, but is it something that the board should be doing? No, the board should be telling someone else to fix it. But that does get into the big picture for us of how much of the communications challenges that we're identifying as the big picture problem are things where the board directly needs to improve our communication, or the board needs to be telling the administration our communications is an opportunity for growth, that this is a specific area where some directed, focused investment could have big improvements for us as a district, not just in reaching parents, but this is actually something where I think as a group, part of the reason that we all rated it relatively low is that we think it's important and we think we can do better. If it's important and we're doing our best, that's a different matter than it's important and we can do better. And so that, I think, was the sense that we had. So
I think that's right. And to add on to that, I mean, I do think the board itself and our direct communication, I just think about the way, okay, how do we communicate with the community as a board? We respond to emails sometimes. We have board meetings where we say things or do things. And then we occasionally publish things. I'm thinking about that. It's rare that our board does direct communication with the community. So I think that's an opportunity, and I think the times that we have done that have been helpful, and I even think that there are ways we could have done it better. I'm thinking about when the board made a proclamation around having our kids come back to school. I can't recall when that was. Maybe, Mark, it was maybe right around the time of this. I think that was helpful. I think that was a good communication. That was a helpful communication. I also think it's one that we didn't disseminate, and there was an opportunity for growth there. We could have done it better as a board. I think those sort of things, fitting in those within our governance structure, it's a challenge of not overstepping our role as a board, but I also think it's an opportunity. And that's the sort of thing, that's what I was talking about, there's a distinction. Like I view that as a different opportunity than what Chris was discussing.
Thank you for that. We will have a chance to discuss this further when we get to the strategic plan and the connection to your work, because that is an area of focus. So this is a helpful down payment on that. Okay, who wants to go next? Okay.
So Siri and I also honed in on communication, but I did want to, and as part of that, the linkages that we held this year in particular around OE14, and the need to have more engagement via linkages with community, but also to have a plan to have continuing engagement. Not have okay, we heard from you and we're done, and now we'll come back to you the next time we need something, but to develop that, ongoing communication with community. One of the things I found interesting was the item we scored the lowest on as a board, the very last one, number 15, on collaboration with colleagues across the region and state and country. When you look at how we rated that question in 2021, and then you look at 2018, there's been significant improved perception of how we are handling that, and yet it's a thing that ended up being the lowest score on our overall list. And perhaps, every Friday at 8 a.m., Siri and I met, and often John joined us, with East Side school directors and public health, or Superintendent Rakedahl, or the governor's chief of staff, and had these ongoing conversations for at least 18 months, probably more like 20 months at this point. And perhaps there needs to be a process for reporting that type of communication out. It wasn't the entire board could come, because every district would have had to call an open public board meeting, and there were 5 districts involved every Friday, and the logistics of actually trying to get all of us there would have been difficult. However, there is that need for the entire board to be involved in this type of communication and collaboration. And so how do you build a process in for that? And also, how do you build in a process for reporting back what was discussed, what you have learned, and then make suggestions on things that you might throw out to the entire board as something, they could improve on.
So I'm hearing you say that this is an area where some board members feel like they were more involved than others, but there wasn't that connection or communication between and within the board.
Yes, and I will own that one as legislative rep. Perhaps I needed a better way of reporting out what we did in those meetings.
So the other sort of theme, we've spoke of communication. The other theme we saw through there was community engagement, which I believe is different than communication. There's the out, but there's also how are we involving them? And several of these we rated low in regards to a consistent engagement. And when you look again at our policy governance structure, there is a big component around linkages, and a big role we play is engaging to be able to get that information. And that has always been something we have worked to try to improve and have not succeeded yet to be consistent in being able to do so. And I think that played out as we did that self-assessment through here, that those items jumped in. The other piece that we mentioned is another one that we did not rate ourselves was ensure the public is well informed of the board's roles and responsibilities. And so the question there, and then if you looked at the range in that one, I believe that's a rainbow one, as you mentioned, is I'm not sure the board is in agreement as to what our roles and responsibilities are. So perhaps that's making it more difficult in which to be able to have that clear in the community, based on that range that was coming across. So that was something that we just noted as we went through.
Okay, anything else there? I will share with you anecdotally, I don't have the data to back this up other than just, I've worked with a lot of boards around their board self-assessment in the last 2 years. And this area of community engagement is almost universally with the boards I've worked with, been lower these last 2 years because people, I think largely because people haven't been able to gather. Board meetings have been disrupted and online, in some cases off and on. So not to let you off the hook in any way, but just to share with you that's certainly a trend that anecdotally I have noticed across the state.
Right, and though if we look at the trend that we have from 2016, it's similar. It's consistently been there.
Great, good, really good point, Suri. Okay, last group.
So we kind of started at the bottom and worked our way up. It's interesting to me that that last item of collaborate with colleagues across the region, state, or nation, and then 4 up from that, advocate at the local, state, and federal levels on behalf of students in the district, that the board rates itself so low given all of the discussions and engagement that I know the board has. And maybe to Cassandra's point, maybe it's just that it's not elevated for full board knowledge and understanding of what's actually occurring. And so that's just a wonder that I have. I don't have any data to say that this board is doing a fabulous job or a horrible job. So I don't know where it lies. It's just the perception that this board has. The second item from the bottom, set goals for improvement. That probably will be one of the rainbow round concepts. But as I look at that item, it does appear that maybe the board doesn't have a great understanding of what the board's goals for improvement actually are. And so there could be just misunderstanding across the board. And so some potential work to be there. Mark, do you want to talk about that last item we discussed around ensure the public is well informed of the board's roles and responsibilities?
Really
Oh, I'm
quickly.
sorry.
No, I just wanted to clarify because that question, I think, is in the wrong spot according to the data from the number 63. Yeah. I'm not quite sure.
Well, and that may be related to the fact that this is a composite of multiple years.
Right,
versus-
but in reference to John's comments, it's not reflective of
Thank you for
kind
that.
of
Okay.
this board's opinion.
Leah, do you want to, is there more you'd like to say about that?
Is your point that the current scoring of that?
Yeah, so this board, 4 out of 5 members rated it as always
This year?
this year.
This year, it's just 3.8.
Yes.
For what it's worth, I think that's accurate. I think in the last year or 2, the board actually has, I think that actually has been a focus of the board, and there has been more, to my eye, more engagement at the state and federal level by the board members.
Yeah, thank you. One of our colleagues would also advocate for seeing a trend over time, that three data points helps us to draw better conclusions. So yes, lots of work has been done. I've been part of those conversations. They've been really beneficial. So.
I think that we need to be able to better articulate to the community the purpose of a board. I don't think because some of us may differ on it, that may be part of the reason, I don't know. I also think that may ebb and flow with time and the situations. The public, I think, sees us more as their ombudsman, and to a degree, I agree with that. I think that we are here to hold the superintendent accountable for the performance of the district, but I don't think the public sees how we can do that or the method that it can be done. That sounds like I'm blaming the public, and I don't think so. I think it's us that we need to explain that better. And when it comes to the collaboration, I think we collaborate a lot, but again, to Cassandra and Siri's point, we don't communicate that. But at the same time, we still try to blend into the crowd as opposed to lead the crowd. And I think we're abdicating our position of leadership in a lot of ways when it comes to our colleagues outside of the district. As the second largest, I think we ought to be trying to demonstrate that leadership or take on responsibility for more leadership across the state. Not saying that we're the big 800-pound gorilla, but at the same time, we're not one of the ants either.
Great, thank you for that. Did everyone have a chance to share?
We do have one more thing I'd like to add.
Great, go ahead.
The follow an effective process for responding to questions, concerns, comments, or feedbacks. If I look at that through time, is 66. You could argue it's a slight trending down, but I'm not going to worry about doing a trend there. But the piece there is it did rate low in the whole piece as to how effective that is, and I'm not sure we're consistent as to what our process is. So it seems that that's something we want to be thinking about in regards to how are we doing that. I know we have a policy that we wrote in regards to that specifically, and so it would be interesting, but how are we doing that and where are we at and what does it mean? Is it effective right now that typically the policy, we have the president responds to anything that comes to board members? Is that effective? Is that working for our community? Is that working for us? I would argue it doesn't appear to be, because we're not saying that we're always being able to do this well.
Great, thank you for that. Chris?
So what Mark said resonates with me from the perspective, trying to step up to an even bigger picture of, there are some of the questions where it's hard to get a consistent answer unless we all have the same reference point. And the roles and responsibilities of the board are something that do vary by board member, but we don't formalize that. And that's a conversation I really would like to have around coming to some consensus around what's expected of all board members versus what are things that some board members can do. Because if we have an agreement across that, it makes it a whole lot easier for us to come to a consensus about how well we're doing at it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Good. Anybody else? Okay, it's rainbow round. Here we go. Ready? So I think at this point you know what rainbow round means, but if you take out your big report and take a look at question 6, for example, that's a good example of this year being, and that's an interesting one in particular because this year looks different than previous years. But you can see on question 6, You have one person who said always, two who said most of the time, one said some of the time, and one said never. Only thing you didn't have was I don't know. So everyone had an opinion on this. but you all have different perceptions on that. So that is an example of a rainbow. Question 27 also is another example of that, where you have some wide disparity across it. As Chris just pointed out, sometimes that relates to how you read the question or how you interpreted the question. Some of these questions have an awful lot packed into them. That's one of the things we're really looking at as we revise the standards for 2022, is pulling out a question that's really more like 3 questions, because that's challenging. So you really want to focus in on, what is the essential question. It's fair for some of you to interpret those questions differently. So when you have this next round of discussions, just really trying to tease out, to the extent that you can, what might be the reason for this disparity or wide range of responses. Again, it's not necessarily a bad thing, unless because you all have different opinions and different experiences, different perceptions, but it can sometimes be problematic on a board because it can keep you all from moving forward. So again, the questions, think about, were those clustered? Again, same thing. Were they clustered in 1 or 2 specific standard areas? And do you think as a board you want to use those areas as opportunities for increasing cohesiveness? Is that possible? How would you go about that? What would that look like? Okay, so last grouping here, I have Siri and Eric, Mark and Leah, and Cassandra, John, and Chris. And we're going to work until, I'm going to give you only 10 minutes this time. I know, so that you have a good 10, 15 minutes to report back, okay? So you have till 10:25. Yeah, Mark did buy you some time. Yeah, you owe him. You owe him a good 2 minutes. Okay, who wants to start this one? Or I can pick.
I really want to start this one.
Chris is dying to start. Go ahead, start.
So this is an interesting space because I don't do qualitative. I just don't. So I'm trying to wade through this and figure out a way to make it work. And so for me, there are two different pieces you can do. You can either say, well, where do we seem to have the greatest standard deviation? For something that's more of a, where do we just have the greatest disagreement? And to me, the latter is the more interesting space because the standard deviation on 5 data points is a big number anyway. And so the never is a new phenomenon. I mean, you look at the summary data, and we just haven't had nevers before, and that immediately leads me to well, okay, setting everything else aside, why do we have nevers? Is this something where we're encountering some new thing where we're going separate ways? Or is this something where all of us have our own homeostatic set point? I'm an easy grader, Siri's a harsh grader, and all of us shifted down, which created nevers where there hadn't been nevers before. Two different possibilities. And so looking at the questions that generated a never was interesting to me because they do have a theme. It's the same theme that I saw in our weaknesses. But even if you take the nevers out of those questions, in most cases, on average, we graded them harshly. I mean, we're getting 3s and 3.1s, 2.8s. They're consistent with other things we've discussed. But stepping back from that, then it gives me the question of never and always shouldn't be possible if we're interpreting the question the same way. And we've got never and always in virtually all of the questions where we've got never, which means that at some level, as a board, individually, we're interpreting the questions differently. That matters a lot because this is something where we can't, as a board, move together if our assumptions aren't the same. And that's why I'm really interested in stepping back and asking bigger questions than, question number 67. No, I don't want to drill into question number 67. I want to talk about what are the underlying themes that what kind of assumptions lead to this difference in thematic interpretation. To me, that matters a lot because I suspect underneath the hood, it's different interpretations of what the board's role is and what the board member individually role is as well. And to me, that would be an incredibly valuable thing to discuss, even though it's tough. I mean, I know that Siri has been trying desperately to drag me into things that I do not want to do for years. We've been on the board together for 12 years now? Anyway, only 10. Okay, it feels like 12. So, but it's something where, to the extent that even where each of us may be a little bit uncomfortable with it, as long as we accept the overall consensus around something, it'll help us evaluate ourselves more consistently. And I'm not saying that we have to evaluate ourselves as easy graders. I just want to try to consistently grade so that each of us is seeing the same flaws and saying, under what we've agreed to grade on, this is where we're at. So anyway, having started the rainbow conversation, I haven't talked about a single specific question. I'm going to leave that to everyone else. This is where I want to start.
Actually, I think that overall summary is maybe even more helpful than looking at any one specific question. So I really appreciate all of those insights. You're absolutely right. It's either that you're interpreting the question differently or you're interpreting your role differently. And so getting to which one of those it is really the crux of being able to have good conversations. So thank you for that.
And actually, there's a third piece of that I think we had come up with earlier was around sometimes there's the role of the board member as in here's what is expected of all board members. What we don't necessarily have is here's what's allowed of individual board members, what isn't expected of all board members. That's a conversation I don't think we've ever explicitly had, and that would help us. Oh, sorry, there's what is expected of all board members, but then there's what can board members do that we don't expect of all board members. I'm personally not going to go to things between the hours of 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. on a weekday. Not going to happen. But that would be allowed of other board members who are capable of doing that, as a silly example.
And I think that last point you just made plays out in one of our recent board meetings where we had the discussion about, can we have an entire board visit a school? And it would be fantastic if an entire board could, but is it logistically possible in all cases?
And if it isn't possible for the whole board, is it still something that is valuable, and how would individual board members participate in that in such a way that the whole board can benefit from? Anyway, so these
Absolutely.
conversations are ongoing.
And would you have to call it an open meeting if all five of them show up?
Yeah, there's the quorum problem. I mean, the quorum problem is nothing to sniff at. I yield the talking stick to whoever wants it.
No, I think your summary is much more helpful than us looking at individual questions and how they were answered. I think you've really gotten to the root of it, and going forward, what you might delve into and try and discover.
Oh, I was just going to say that Mark's and my conversation was very similar. We were talking about when we were talking about opportunities, and Chris brought up consensus about the duties and responsibilities of board members. That was, I think, really reflective in the rainbow of responses on certain topics. So, yes, we concur.
Yeah, playing off of what Chris was saying, I think anytime you have a collective, each individual brings their own temperaments, talents, and convictions to it. And we all have our strengths, we all have our weaknesses, we all have our availabilities, we have our limits. And that's what makes a board. We also have different perceptions of how to carry out our responsibilities. There is a perception by the public that we rubber stamp whatever the staff wants. I don't share that. Maybe to a degree we do, but then again, when you're right, you're right. So why, don't slap somebody down when they come into you with the right information. I, to a degree probably larger than others, see us as representing the public to the board, representing the public to the district, to the staff, and not vice versa. And that then plays another dynamic really into the whole group. We also segued into the murky wall, and sometimes I guess it'd be more of a murky creek than wall between administrative policy and policy, or board policy. I worked for 10 years as a staff member answering to a 20-member board. And there was a perception by the board members that if we didn't want to do something, we put a really massive, nasty dollar total on it that was totally out of the air. To make sure the board didn't want to do it. And, or it's going to cost us millions? Oh my God, no. And there was that perception, but and there may be a little bit of reality in it too, to be quite frank. But, so I understand, having worked the other side of it, that you don't want the board interfering in your operations or in your day-to-day trying to carry out their policies, because it seems to be, it often throws a monkey wrench into everything. It'd be great if we work more in partnership with staff than we do. I'd like to see that more, because I think a good example of that is the last few weeks, or every time we have a levy or a bond, the staff presents what I refer to as the Jack Webb version, just the facts, ma'am. And then we come in with, here's why you ought to do it. And it works very well. It's a 1-2 punch. But I think, I know this, I think that causes perhaps the confusion in the public as well as it does in the board as to what we should be doing. The public perceives us as we should be running the district, quote unquote, as opposed to us being liaison to the district and through the superintendent, and which is more effective. It's more workable. To have us monkeying around in the inner workings is not a good use of staff time, or ours perhaps. Also, however, it's also that on the flip side of that coin, it's sometimes how we get the attention of staff, of feelings from the community about issues. If we don't make those voices known, then we are a rubber stamp.
Great, thanks for that input, Mark. So does anybody else have a comment? And then I want to let you take a quick 5-minute break.
No, I was just thinking about, what the role of a board is. And when we bring issues in the community to the superintendent, we don't bring them to staff members because everything goes through the superintendent, so that the superintendent can then say, okay, I see this as an issue, and, communicate to staff what to do, since we don't have a direct role with staff. So I think there's a pretty fine line of what interaction the board would have with staff members.
So if I can just jump in on so as I think about this, part of this is again, roles and responsibilities as defined by the board, and I think that's sort of been the overarching, and you see that as we go through, especially around community engagement, around communication, what's adequate, what's the board's role, what's the district's role, trying to establish those parameters. And I do remember as I look back, at one point we had the public participation matrix as part of a decision-making piece, and I think, John, you're probably aware of that. I'm not quite sure what happened to it. I think as we shifted through superintendents and different things and different priorities. But I think part of this challenge is we're not clear as to when is community engagement going through at what level, and how are those decisions getting made, and those different pieces. So how do we ensure those pieces? We set it in our parameters, we have it there. But as I look through all these pieces, which are community and communication, where we as a board score ourselves the lowest as well in regards to it, I think that's the place to start thinking about, is what is our decision make? How do we just say, okay, we're going to run focus groups within our community to be able to do these things and be able to get this information and do the two-way feedback and be able to do that? How do we develop those relationships along these lines to be able to maintain those community connections so that we ensure my connections directly into the community? I also have a broader perspective outside of that as well to be able to most effectively bring in a wide range of how we are serving our whole community, especially as it grows more diverse over time. And there are so many new ways of communication. How do we manage those and work with those and utilize those from a board perspective? And how do we ensure that we are responding within the policy? And the reason I push the policy piece is we have to be thinking how our process and policies work in which to address these things, because oftentimes it is a gray line between operation and this piece. And as a board, we have options to move that line, but we move them as a board, not as an individual. And that's the piece I think we have to be thinking about at all times.
Any thoughts from anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Leah or Eric, Chris?
I want Eric to pipe up, but if he's not going to pipe up, then I,
You're going to say what you want Eric to
pretty
say?
much.
Okay.
No, yeah, Eric yields his time to me. And I also very much want a potty break. I am with Cassandra, so maybe we continue this afterwards. I just know that you might be in my corner on that. But ultimately, I think it's really worth us continuing to have this conversation, not merely around what policy guidelines are, but to me, the big picture matters because there are different dimensions to our jobs. There's being the community representative, which involves all the community engagement and communication. There's financial oversight, where I really don't find the community particularly helpful in terms of financial oversight. Rather, we've been elected to do that job and to pay attention to it. There's advocate, again, and that's not just within our system, that's externally to larger groups. But the one that I always fret over losing sight of, and I weigh it more heavily than my colleagues, and it's okay, is oversight. To me, oversight of the district, making sure things are running accurately, is more important than being the complaints department for the district. And you can do both things, but not well if you do them all the time. And so it's a matter of where do we put in, how much resources do we put individually here, or for that matter, and this is something where I think, even though I don't believe it's my job to be the complaints department, I do think we could do a better job of having a complaints department. So this is the sort of thing where as a board to provide more direction around getting an ombudsperson in place who is responsible officially for this stuff is a valuable conversation. I am not interested in being that person. And I think no, everybody could have predicted that. This is again, yeah. But this is something we're having the conversation amongst ourselves around where do we draw lines around what is something we expect of all board members. But again, it's something where it's what's something that's important that we're missing that might be causing these cracks to form, in our opinion. That the community engagement, we're doing a better job as a district, but could we improve our communications system? Yes. But most importantly, I think the biggest fracture we might be dealing with is the resolution of things. In a system with 30,000 students, we will never, ever get to the point where nobody is unhappy with the outcome of a decision. That's just reality. Do people feel that they were fairly dealt with, even though it went against them? That's the really important thing. And so setting those processes in place is really important for us. How do we achieve that? So anyway, I just wanted to leave us here because I'm looking forward to what areas do you want to focus on for individual and professional? That's a little bit vague. I would really like to continue this conversation after we have a potty break.
If it makes you feel any better, even a district of 30 students will never have everybody happy with them. So it's
Yeah,
just
a classroom
percentages.
of 30, you're
So
right.
before we take a break, I want to give Leah an opportunity. Again, I'm sort of modeling, make sure that within your board meetings, everyone is sharing the talking time. It's really important. And some people speak to think, and some people think to speak. And those are different ways, and you want to make sure that the thinkers who've actually thought out what they're going to say, that's a novel concept for me, have the opportunity. So Leah, I just want to, you can also, like Eric did, you can yield your time, but if you have something you'd like to share here, I want to give you the opportunity.
I don't think I have any novel insights at this point. Yeah, I can yield my time.
Okay, and then John, I want to give you an opportunity before we break.
One of our assistant superintendents always says clear is kind, and I think clarity always helps everyone do their work better. And being clear isn't about not allowing someone to do something, but clarity helps everyone to do their work better and move things forward collectively.
That's Brené Brown. If you haven't read Brené Brown, it's a good one to read. Okay, great. Let's take a 5-minute break. Be back here about 10:55.
There you go.
Okay, here we go.
Diane and Teresa. I did.
Okay, you all have made it through 3 hours on a Saturday morning, so nicely done. Feel free to dig into your snacks if you'd like to. Little sustenance to get us through the last hour. So I think, you all identified some really interesting issues as you worked through your board self-assessment. I heard a lot of, we should discuss this more. And so I would really encourage you to do so. Part of that, I'll get my notes back to you, which will be, they'll be summarized. But a couple things I just want to point out to you that I heard in every round, because I think that it may help inform the next activity we're going to do, which we're going to compress just a little bit. And again, this next activity is maybe just a taste of some things that you might want to do in your retreat or in other work sessions. But the two things that really crystallized from your conversations in terms of what I heard from you, they're related to each other. So one is we really as a group, you all as a group really want to discuss what's our board's role, our board as a whole, what is the collective board's role, and what are our individual school directors' roles. And very closely related to that is what is our expectation of each individual school director, and what are, so really, like, what's the bare minimum? What is our minimum expectation of every board member that they'll meet? And then also defining what are some additional roles that other board members, individuals, might take on as the board. So you have both sort of a bottom, which is the minimum, but there's also, I heard the word allowed used. Like, what are we, to what degree are we comfortable with individual board members going out and doing things on their own as individuals? What's that level too? So I just heard a lot of conversation around that. You'll get that back in the notes, but I wanted to point that out. I don't know if anybody has anything they'd like to say about that right now. Don't have to if you don't want. Okay, seeing a lot of shaking heads. No thanks, we'll move on. So the next item that we're gonna move into, and we're gonna do this is, like I said, gonna be fairly quickly. This will be a little bit of a down payment. One of the things that's a challenge, and all of you identified some of these, like, well, what's operational? What's strategic or board level? And there's that, I heard the word murky line. There's a murky line or a moving line, and that got even murkier over the last couple of years because you were doing all kinds of weird operational stuff. It was actually required of you that really hasn't ever been before. So refocusing yourself a little bit on what is our role and looking at your strategic plan. Whoops, sorry, bonked that. So you all have a copy of the strategic plan. Oh, you don't. Sorry, I should have passed those out. You will. They're coming at you right now. So the strategic plan, here's what I see consistently with boards. There's this strategic plan put together. Oftentimes they're just really beautifully done, both in the execution of the strategic planning process, how you gather the information, how they're put together. They're put together in beautiful booklets like this. Sometimes people just districts put them on the shelf and nobody ever sees them again. Although I do really see a lot of boards trying very hard, and districts, the district staff as well as the board, really trying to figure out how do we operationalize all of this. The challenge is, as a board, what's our piece in this? What's our role? And so we're going to spend just a little bit of time doing that. You're going to get frustrated with me because I'm only going to give you about a half an hour to do this because we're going to end. I know it's not nearly enough time, but again, it might be a little. I'm going to give you a taste of it so that if it's an exercise that you think you want to do later and really invest more time in, you can. If it is something that you don't find really is helpful for all of you, you don't have to spend any more time on it. Is that fair enough? Okay, so I have written titles. So if you turn to page 3, you have the Elevate Priorities. And I'm going to ask you some questions here. And John, you might be able to help obviously here as well. So on page 3, you have 6 different priorities that you are, within the strategic plan, choosing to elevate. So there's success, well-being, engagement, excellence, innovation, and equity. And then, as you turn the pages, there's a little bit more specificity in each of those. So success, you've actually gone into some detail around initiatives and some measures as well around specifically academic success. So that one's fairly easy for you to have some conversations around. Well-being is just exactly what it is listed as on page 8, well-being. Engagement was defined further as community engagement. You've all had some good conversations around that already this morning based on the self-assessment. And then you have, under excellence, you have on page 12, excellent staff. And then it goes, and then there's not exactly a one-to-one correlation. So I just want to check with you all on this, because the next one is innovation, but the next real detailed look on page 14 is effective use of resources. So I want to check in with you on how you want to handle that, and then also just a little confirmation. So my observation is that the last one on page 3, equity, has actually been embedded into each of these. So for example, if you look at, let's start with, let's go back to academic success on page 4. So it looks to me like equity has been embedded through culturally responsive teaching and the multi-tiered systems of support. Is that right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So.
And Tricia, if I may, innovation was actually to be integrated through all of those as well. The
Got it.
5 pieces you see there were the 5 strategic goal areas, and these priorities are to lay out between those.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So the 5th one really should be effective use of resources. Okay, I think I might be missing that one, so I'll add that. That's helpful. So here's what I'm asking you to do in this extremely ridiculously short time of 30 minutes. You're not going to go through all of them at all. Again, I'm just going to give you a taste of them. Probably you'll have an opportunity to go to 2. So let me give you an example through, let's take a look at academic success. So that's on pages 4 and 5. What I want you to think about is within this strategic area, did you call it a pillar? Is that what you called it? Or a what?
Goal area.
A goal area. Okay, yeah. People have different words for the same thing. So, so within your goal area of academic success for your district, I'd like you to take a look specifically at, all right, what is our board's role in academic success? So just as an example for you, looking at page 5, for example, it might be, this may or may not be correct for you, but it might be under the multi-tiered systems of support. Maybe your board roles are reviewing data around MTSS. Maybe your board role is aligning the budgetary needs around that. Maybe it isn't. Maybe that's not correct. Under providing training, when you're talking about professional development for your staff, that's probably a budgetary item. You might have some other roles around that too. Under designing a multi-year plan to increase inclusionary practices, that might be an area where your board needs to have some professional development around what is inclusionary practices so that you understand what that is when you get reports around it. Again, it might be, so that might be an area of board professional development. It might have some budgetary implications too. So, and all of what I said, those are just potential examples. Those might not be accurate for you. But what I want to do is give you a little bit of practice in thinking about how do we take this, which is largely operational in terms of the actual work that gets done, and how do we support and focus on this and make sure that we're doing our role as a board. Does that make sense? It's a big thing to ask you to do in 30 minutes. So I'm not going to ask you to do every one of them. What I'd like you to do is take maybe about 10 minutes at one of the 5 goal areas, and I have put them on flip charts around the room. I think I need to change one of them. Do I have it back there? Okay. And so I did write in the equity connection here, the embedded equity. Probably need to pay some attention to innovation on each of these too. So I'll give you some time. You can self-select, and Chris, I know you've got a question, so I think you do. You're free to
Sorry,
choose. Yeah.
my question is, in each of these sections, the tail end of the last page, page 7, progress indicators, each of those is, to me, an explicit declaration of the board role and responsibility in monitoring these progress indicators. So I don't understand the question. I already have a cheat sheet that tells me what I see as my board role. So you're telling me there's something more here?
I'm asking, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know that everyone agrees with you. I agree with you. I agree with you, but, oh, sorry. Yeah, so I think that's the framework for the discussion.
I don't agree with you two, because the board has your results policies, which these would play out in, but the board also has operational expectations that set the parameters for the operations of the school district. And the strategic plan is full of operations, and the board has stated values within your policies that should have helped the development of the strategic plan. And so there's a correlation between both the operations and the results key indicators.
Okay, and just to be clear, I agree with Chris at a broad level as to that our role is oversight and evaluation, not that these particular indicators are the only ways in which we do that.
It's all right. I mean,
Who's on
honestly,
first, what's on second? I don't know what's on third.
this is where I was hoping, I would get more out of this as a conversation in the round than as a blackboard exercise. Because John raises a very good point, and I get that, but I also see that as something where our values, I feel, are fairly well articulated. Therefore, I don't feel a whole lot of obligation to be changing them. That's a minor role at this point to me relative to the oversight role. So, John, can you go deeper on that?
I can. And so as I read through this, the culturally responsive teaching trained all staff members. And I believe a couple years ago, because this was, we actualized this, and a couple of years ago in the OE reports, there was data that provided evidence for the board of this being actualized. Now, if we weren't able to produce that data, then to me, we didn't meet the values that the board had identified around ensuring all staff were provided, training related to XYZ. When I think about MTSS, that is a massive, I'll say, project that we are working to implement in the middle of a pandemic. There are some operational challenges that we're currently facing right now. And so it's the board's role to ensure that we're able to articulate how we're moving forward and what we're doing and accomplishing. What are the timelines? What are the expectations of schools and staff? It isn't about the details of MTSS, but it's ensuring that the system is moving forward. And so for each of these, I almost feel like your value is articulated within your policies. And so then it's about, does the board see the connection between the policies and the work of the strategic plan and how you're holding the system, AKA me, accountable that this is actually moving forward?
Which, sorry, just last piece of this then. For this conversation, what will be very helpful for me is the balance between having you report out on how you're operationalizing something like MTSS. I feel like we've been educated as to what MTSS is in our work sessions. But to me, the board role that's really critical is sort of a balance. If we got a 5-hour meeting every other Monday, I'm more interested in getting reports out on performance than on what you have attempted to implement, because I have a reasonable amount of confidence you're going to be able to try and implement, but did you move the needle is the thing that ultimately is what I care about. So Anyway, and that's something I want to hear from the rest of the board about. Where are you guys at? I mean, because this is something that does matter for our work, our main meetings of the board.
So I think there's just a few, even just to build on, and you had mentioned like inclusionary practices. You know, how well is the board aware of what are inclusionary practices? What does that mean? How would you know that's happening? Those are pieces I think MTSS, we had to make sure that we understood what that was. I think as we do our equity work and those pieces, it was very important that we as a board did professional development along that. So as we start to push this out, so when we talk about all staff and training through here, I think we need to include what training might the board need on this subject area. And that might be, you know, maybe it's through sending out information about it. Maybe it's a study session about it. I think of the new assessments we have in, FastBridge and different things. Those are now being used in our monitoring, but I'm not sure I really understand what that assessment is. So I'm not sure I can do that oversight as effectively. So that's how I see, how do we start connecting that strategic plan? What is our role in that?
Go ahead.
I want to hear your.
Well, I hear what you're saying about you want to hear the bottom line, what have we done, as opposed to what are we trying to do.
Not even what have we done, what is the speedometer showing
Yeah.
us?
I want to know that, but I also want to know along the way that we're hitting first base, second base, third base, because if we don't, we're not going to be able to get what the speed is. Do we need to be in minutia in the weeds? No. But at the same time, I want to know progress is being attempted. Because if we see how well they've attempted it, we can say, well, did we set the goal right? Did we set it unrealistically low or unrealistically high?
Or is it even the right metric?
There you go. Exactly. So I need some progress along those lines. It reminds me of that cartoon where the guy had all the formulations on the board, and he says, and here's where the magic happens. And I don't want to find a magic moment. He has all these calculations on the board, and then he points to this one little piece down here, and this is where the magic happens. In other words, all these calculations didn't mean squat, is all magic.
We've hijacked your prompt. Is that, I guess, I have things to say, but I can hold them if you want to do.
No hijacking. I see myself as a guide.
Okay.
And if you all
The inmates are
choose
in
to
this
wander off and look at something that's really important and interesting to you, I feel okay about having led you there.
Okay.
So if this is how, is the most useful thing for you for the next half an hour to just really have a discussion about this?
Could be. I don't know.
And do you want it facilitated in small groups, or do you want to talk in whole group? What works best for all of you? So think about it. I'm going to ask every one of you.
Yeah. I would love to actually explicitly address your last three questions
Okay.
about what does the board need from the soup, what does soup need from those three. I think are definitely worth doing.
Okay, success protocol for sure then. Okay, Cassandra, how about you? What's the most productive use of our last 38 minutes together?
So when I think about this is about moving forward, then I think you should talk to the rest of the people in the room rather than me.
Okay. Siri.
I think what our actual action steps are going forward based on what we've done, some of sort of our next steps are sort of a key component that we need to do. If we're going to continue this discussion, I'd prefer some small group to then come back and have a discussion in bigger. But that would be.
Okay. John?
I'm comfortable with the voice of the board.
All right.
I would actually, I would like to focus on the last half an hour of the agenda, and make sure we get to that. I'm going to respond to what Chris said, though.
Can you hold that for 1 second? Let's go to Leah. I promise to come right back to you, because I think it's a response, yeah. Are you okay? Yeah. Okay, he's going to hold on to it. All right, Leah.
I agree that moving forward, our plan kind of going forward, I think is the most important aspect of this conversation. So dedicating as much time to that as possible would be great.
Okay, so would that be specifically then part of, how does it?
The
or
last
three?
success
Okay, perfect,
protocol.
thank you, success
Yeah.
protocol. Mark?
I agree. My only reservation is I'm not sure time frame wise or workability wise, the small group going back into the big group, it seems to be an extra step. I think we're doing fairly well going round robin here, it seems. And we're not breaking into subgroups. It seems like it's going to take us more time breaking in and out of groups than it is actually discussing what we're wanting to do.
Okay, great. I have a solution for that, so appreciate that.
Okay.
Eric, I promised you we'd come back to you.
Thanks. And I think I actually agree with Chris. I don't recall what he said, but I think I agree with him. And that is, when I think about, so just returning to the prompt was, okay, on for the academic success goal area, what is the board's, what's the board's role, or how should the board, and what I view our role is, well, what I view my role is, I guess, is standard setting within as to performance and the expectation and then setting the parameters with which the districts could operate through our operational expectations. But really the crux of it is the evaluation and accountability piece of results and performance. I am personally less interested in the process piece of that, of monitoring the process of it. I am interested in evaluating the results, and I don't know if that is shared by the board.
Any other input here? Siri?
So from an evaluation standpoint, there are always multiple components, as most of these initiatives and actually approaches are multi-year, that rarely are we implement and a year later you're done. There's a lot of fidelity that has to go through of it. There's lots of change, there's lots of behavior. So often you do need to have a process evaluation at the same time you're using outcome evaluation. They are two different things, and they are valuable, and so actually we do use this in our monitoring reports. Part of the question that you ask, if MTSS is not implemented in every single one of our schools, and that is an indicator we have, then it's not in compliance. And so then where are we at? Where is it going? What is the plan? And we asked for that, and we divide that out, right? So when it moves to process and program, we actually do that separate from that report. And we all appreciated that. That was a piece I remember writing in my summary on Operational Expectation 10, that the additional information given about program and where we were at and the plans to bring it into compliance was highly valuable. So I do think there is a balance act between these, because we are dealing with humans and changing systems and an environmental context that we don't control. So to only look at an outcome and not understand the underlying implementation is problematic. For instance, I can look at our graduation rate, 94%. Excellent, we're done. But I know if I dig through that, fair? And now I have to look at programmatic pieces that might be influencing that are not academic based.
And so there, I guess this is, really, I set the straw man up on purpose. And I set the straw man up on purpose. This is something where I err on the side of I'm interested in seeing how we're doing against our metrics. And over the last couple of years, we've had a lot of focus on how we're going to get there, and which has resulted in decreased focus on presenting where are we and how are we performing. that causes me a little bit of distress. But I absolutely do agree that I need to understand every piece of this. I mean, there's the education component. You need to teach us how these things work. What is MTSS? I better be able to explain that to a constituent. There's also the monitoring. How well are you doing it, implementing it? I mean, monitoring from you telling me and also monitoring from the feet on the ground. I mean, Mark's point around, is integration actually happening in every school? These things matter. And so, but this is the, where is our role? Where do we connect our responsibilities to this document? It still winds up ultimately to me being the progress indicators, even though I appreciate all of the preliminaries to that. To me, this is the thing no one else is doing. So,
Mark?
If we don't know the progress we're making, then all of a sudden, when it comes time to make the final report, and they said, and we all of a sudden come back and say, well, we need another year to know that. Yeah. Well, at 3 months or 6 months, we might have been able to say, okay, we know you're going to need more time, or are you deviating from the original intent? And I think it's usually the idea that you come across so many hurdles that it was more of a difficult task than we all thought it would be. There were all of a sudden a pandemic hit, and your attendance rate is the least of your worries. So I think it's important to know that you've reached those benchmarks, because otherwise you don't know you're going to make your final goal of being able to report what we did.
So I have a question for your superintendent. So in order for you to implement this and meet these progress indicators, I know I'm jumping a little bit to number 3, but let's focus really on the strategic plan. What do you need from your board?
You know, when I think about the board's role in all of this, it's about accountability. And so the board leaning into their structured accountability system for the organization and really leveraging that to help lead and govern the district is really, for me, the best way for us to collaborate, because it's an established process. I would say it's ebbed and flowed over time with how it's been used and implemented. I hope this board knows that I value the relationship and what a publicly elected school board actually brings in terms of community accountability. And so to me, accountability isn't a bad word, because it's about kids. It's about kids learning their experiences in our schools. And so if we continually have a shared kind of goal for kids, then the accountability is around, you know, yes, it might be 94% graduation rate, but I don't think any of us are satisfied with that, because we know who's not graduating, and we will never be satisfied with who's not graduating. And everything in this strategic plan is about getting 100% of our kids to graduate. And how do we get there? We are committed to holding the system accountable. And it's not about firing people, and it's like accountability gets a bad rap, but accountability is actually every kid succeeding. And that may be uncomfortable and hard, and because really we have one of the highest graduation rates in the state of Washington. And so what we're trying to accomplish is something no one has accomplished before. And, you know, having MTSS systems that are implemented with fidelity across the system, that's challenging work. Yet we have to commit to that if we actually want to achieve that. If we really want to do right by all of our students, having a model of inclusionary practices at every one of our schools is the right thing, because we could check a box around graduation possibly for those students, but does that really mean their experience? And that's OE10. And so the pieces are in place for the board to hold the system accountable, and leveraging that and using that is essential. So for me, it's all of us leaning into that accountability system to be able to help lead and govern the district.
To that point, a 95% graduation rate doesn't mean diddly if it's only because they were led to the graduation ceremony and allowed to graduate, as opposed to they earned the graduation. We need to know that we did our job, or that they were educated, they hit the performance scales, and they succeeded, and that's why they're graduating. And that makes graduation meaningful. If it just means they've hit 18 and it's time to kick them down the road, no, we haven't succeeded.
Okay, I'm going to move into our last activity. We've led ourselves there. So it may be that talking about the board's connection to the strategic plan may be helpful for you at your retreat. It also may not be. Again, that's part of digging into these conversations, figuring out what are the conversations we really need to have and what are those that we feel comfortable with. So we're going to start the last one. So you can see on your, and I think a lot of what you all just talked about may end up on here. I'm going to hand out some Post-it notes. The reason for the Post-it notes is to force you to think about one idea at a time. So, which is hard. So I'll pass these out. But again, if you look at the questions that are on your agenda under the success protocol, the first one is what does similar to what I just asked, but this one was more related to the strategic plan. But overall, what does the superintendent need from the board in order to be successful? Primarily, you'll want your superintendent to answer that. But if you'd like to take a guess at it, or what you think, that's okay. Because actually, that would give him the opportunity to say, actually, that isn't what I need from you. Or, oh yeah, I need that from you too. So for board members, that's your secondary focus. But for John, that's your primary focus. The same is true of the last two. So number 2 and number 3. Number 2 is what does the board need from the superintendent in order to be successful? And then what do you as board members need from each other? And you've talked about that a little bit today too. Like, what are your expectations? What do you need from each other in order to be successful? So again, John may want to share his thoughts about what he thinks you need from him. And again, you all have the opportunity to clarify. So what we're going to do is I'm going to let you, for those of you who think to speak, this is your round. Because I'm going to give you the opportunity to think first, put one idea, make sure you know which category they fall in. If you want to number them 1, 2, or 3, that could be helpful for you. So all of your 1s and then all of your 2s. Go ahead and write them on here. I'm going to just kind of look around. The goal isn't to write 10 of them. If you can do 2 or 3 or 4 really, really dialed in, effective ones, that's going to be most important. Questions before I pass these out? Okay.
Do you want us to put them somewhere?
No, you can just hang on to them.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you can. We can put them on the walls if you want, but my flip charts have already been rejected. So.
I just follow the rules.
Thank you for asking. It's okay. The flip charts won't feel bad about this. I've got one more. Yeah. There you go. When you're all done writing, can you put your name card up like this, and then I'll know that you're all done? Thank you. So let's try to get those wrapped up in a couple of minutes, if you could, so we have time to share them. All right, 1 minute. Okay, I'm going to have everybody wrap up. 4 hours seems like a really long time when you're facing it at 8 o'clock on a Saturday, right? But it goes pretty quickly once you're able to have some good conversations with each other. So we're going to start with question 1. What I'm going to ask you to do, we're going to go around, and I'd like you to respond to question 1, one at a time, one Post-it note at a time, and we'll just go around until we've exhausted everything that you've written on number 1. So I'm going to, this time let's start with Leah, and then we'll go to your right.
But when you say number one in the success protocol, what does the superintendent need from the board?
Yes, thank you for clarifying.
So for that one, I just had very clear communication of what we are expecting. Yeah, that's it.
I think it comes down to 2 words, candid and respect. And I think that covers a lot of territory, and if we adhere to those 2 words, everything else works out right.
Clarity of direction, space to operate, support, honesty, and focused attention.
So just to clarify, if you can read one. Okay. That was all on one.
It was just one long.
He wrote
Very
really,
efficient.
he wrote really tiny. I can see it.
I'm taking these home with me. I probably won't even be able to read it, will I, Chris? No, that's great. Sorry, go ahead,
So I
Cassandra.
wrote, the superintendent needs the board to respect each other and to always be respectful of staff.
So this one is, what does the board need from the superintendent? Was that the right one?
Oh,
From the board.
I think I have a different order. Thank you. I was looking at a draft. Gotcha. Thanks. Thank you.
okay, so I have clarity of policies and expectations.
My first Post-it is focus on the results of students by articulating the expected outcomes and knowing what progress and success is.
You got that all in one Post-it?
Go ahead, Eric.
I wrote focus on outcomes. The board's focus on outcomes, to be clear.
My other Post-its are for the other 2.
Number 2 now?
Do you have any more on number 1? Okay, that's fine. Chris?
Sorry, I already did all of mine.
That's okay, it's fine. Cassandra, okay. Sorry, okay. John?
No, that was all for me.
I'll read my other 3.
Yeah. And that makes sense that you have a lot of
It's
them.
hold the system accountable while recognizing the quality work that happens every day. My third is one word, collaboration. Fourth be willing to allow the system to change. And it's an experience that I have as well, because the system has changed since I was a teacher. The system has changed since I was a principal. The system has changed since my youngest was in the school district and I was a parent. So yet I continue to go back to those as a mental model. And so I have to force myself to transition as to what is right now. And sometimes there's good transition and sometimes there's not as good a transition. So the system will change over time and I have to be willing to do that. And I invite you to do that as well.
To John's point, it's all evolution. Everything evolves. Nothing ever stays the same. If it did, it'd be a damn boring life. It might be easy to expect everything, but it's always going to evolve, and hopefully it evolves for the better.
Can we get a copy of that, John? I mean, seriously, your 4 are detailed enough that I really would find them useful to have them in front of me.
So here's my intent, that all of you will leave those sticky notes at your place. I plan to collect them and provide them all back to you. Does that meet that need, Chris?
As long as I know what,
That's the most writing I've done.
Everyone's now revising their.
as long as I know which one was John's.
Sure.
But I'm pretty sure I'll write.
Okay.
It was
put your
not
name
an
on it,
essay
John.
question, John, I'm sorry.
Any other thoughts? Were any of you surprised by what he said? No. Do you think you're doing that for him now?
I think we probably do pieces of it at different times better than at other times. So I would assume there are components of it that we do along the way.
I would phrase it as, I think we try to do these things, but we don't necessarily do them as well as we hope to.
How about from your perspective?
I think that's with any collaborative relationship. If you set your targets for what you want to be, you can always work towards them. Like, none of us live in this space 100% of the time. And what the board's about to share with you around number 2, I don't live in that space 100% of the time. And so it's always about growing and getting better. And I think that's something we all have committed to doing.
Great. Any other thoughts on that one before we move to number 2? Eric, are you rewriting all of them legibly for me? Thank you, I appreciate that. I appreciate your extra effort here. And as a reward for that, I'll have you go last on this next round. How's that sound? Okay. I love it. That's a good facilitation note for myself. Tell people to please write legibly. See, I learn something new every time, too. That's great. Okay, so next one is number 2. What does the board need from the superintendent in order to be successful? And in consideration of the rewriting going on over here. Siri, let's start with you. Oh, okay. So one sticky note, item number 2, what does the board need from the superintendent?
So partnership and collaboration to work together for excellent public schools and for our students.
I wrote clear communication to board and community.
I'm going to do 2, but you'll understand why. First, I wrote information, and then I wrote clear and concise information.
It's the flip side of the other coin, I want them to be candid, and I also want them to provide that with respect too. I had a third, honesty, but to be quite frank, that presupposes they're being dishonest. So, but I want candid information, and I want it respectful. That you can't be candid without being respectful, to be quite frank. I don't think.
I wrote, this is without having had much experience working with you at all, so you might already be doing this, but very honest feedback to the board about, whether or not we're meeting your expectations and needs, and also oversharing of information, I find, is usually better than less.
The first one I did was timely, accurate, and meaningful monitoring reports.
I did not.
So then I had clear and concise data analysis and conclusions that demonstrate level of progress and compliance along the monitoring reports line.
So my next one was dynamic leadership of the district, because district performance is your performance, is our performance.
I see what number 3, is that what you're saying, or are we continuing number 2?
We're still in number 2.
Oh, well, mine didn't change. Oh, you wrote the same 3. Yeah.
So my next one, I'm actually having a hard time reconciling it with some of the other things I've said before. So I've been sort of struggling with that. But it's something I still feel like I need, even though it's a hard time reconciling with that with how I view the job of the board, is to be brought along on what is going on, and honestly on an operational level, just to be brought along. But I have a hard time then, what I have a hard time with then is, okay, so why? Why do I feel that way? And I don't have the answer yet. I just think, I guess I feel that as a board member, I have an obligation to be informed, but I still have a hard time of then connecting that to what end. Yeah, I don't have the answer for that yet. That's what I've been wrestling with as I was
I think
writing.
that is incredibly honest feedback and the role of the board. I mean, you want to know everything that's going on, and yet, how does that work for the superintendent? I mean, I appreciate your honesty around that.
I just think there's an expectation for those who elect us to this job that is part of our job. I just also kind of wrestle with really should that be part of the job? So that's where I'm just not sure.
Is your unsureness because you can read your own writing?
What's that?
Is your unsureness because you can read your own writing?
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible.
So for this relationship to work, there has to be an assurance of trust that what I'm saying and how I'm saying the district is functioning, that there's some level of evidence to that. So just because I provide an operational update doesn't mean that you're going to turn around and say, oh no, don't do that, do this.
Yeah.
But it provides you with the assurance that on some level, things are being tended to, followed up with. And so it's less about you directing the operations, but you have to have an assurance. And that's just reporting around operational. And so that, Thursday communications are part of that.
Yeah.
Updates from, programs and departments are that. The different types of information I share with the board, the majority of that is operational, just to keep the board apprised of some of the big items that are occurring across the district.
So my last number 2 had been open and ongoing dialogue, but that's pretty redundant with what's been said already. But from Eric's comment, I agree. I mean, it's one of those things where theoretically we define the boundaries on the playing field and we define the end zone where you've succeeded. Within there, he's choosing the route. You're calling the plays. But I actually feel like I understand why we need to understand the plays. That's all it comes down to. It's not that we need to be consulted on which plays are being run. We need to understand what you're running so that we can explain it to people who come to us, and we can say that we actually understand how you're getting to the end zone, even if you haven't gotten there yet. So I can work with that.
Okay.
I have one more, number 2. So it's along the willingness to dialogue around those monitoring reports and the outcomes that come from that in order as we look to what does that mean and how do we move forward and leaning into our process.
Okay, great. So we're going to go to number 3, which is what do board members need from one another in order to be successful? And want to start?
Yeah, I'll try first. It's the same one I wrote actually for one. I'll start with that, and that is a focus on results of the district. So I guess what I view I need from other board members is a disciplined focus on I guess what I view the job of the board to be. I need everyone to agree with me. That's what I need. That's really what it comes down to at the end. Thank you, Mr. Crowe. So there we are.
As a new board member, I think this one's pretty obvious, but a lot of background information on issues and topics that are relevant now. A lot of the current board members have been on the board for a very long time, so they know a lot more history that I have no idea about. So just kind of being cognizant of that.
Mark, do you want to repeat yours?
Yep.
Okay.
It really comes down to being candid with each other, telling us what you really think as opposed to what you want us to think. Candid being the honesty, really. Don't tell me one thing and do another. And that comes down to respect. Respect for each other's experiences, respect for each other's abilities, and respect for each other as our experience, where we're coming from and where we need to go.
Is the question board members, or what does this board member need? Anyway,
Yeah.
my first instinct was forgiveness. I've been known to think out loud, and I very much appreciate the degree to which people allow me to think out loud. So, but that's just part of the open and ongoing dialogue component that's so important: trust, respect, honesty. But for me, forgiveness is the unspoken piece of that.
I feel board members need to respectfully adhere to board policies.
And I have respectful dialogue, honest discussion, and grace. And speak for your person and not for anybody else on the board.
I have another one. I have a hard time putting this into words, so I'll think aloud. Is that what you were calling it? Maybe I'll arrive at there. I think that I'm gonna arrive at this by way of an example, if that's okay. I think that all board members need to I think the board is most effective if everyone on the board is operating with a similar set of information at a similar point in time. I think, so I've been the board chair for a year or so now, and I think one area where I could have done a better job is making sure, if like agendas, everyone is brought along sooner than late, that everyone has the same information at the same point in time, just in terms of our process. And so I guess the broader concept is a sharing of information and a supporting each other with that information too. I don't know. I'm not quite there yet, but that's the concept.
My next one was about a consensus or a mutual understanding about the roles, the responsibilities, and the expectations of board members. Mainly because I think that if you have unequal, or I don't know a better term for it, an unequal level of participation amongst board members, there tends to be a dominant voice and a dominant opinion that is going to influence policies and procedures. And in order for this to be a democratic board where we each have an equal voice, then I think that there needs to be some standard of participation and responsibilities.
Chris, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. So, to be quite frank, forgiveness is really part of that respect. Because if we respect each other as what we bring to the table, we're willing to forgive each other's ability, how we do it. And otherwise, we all go our separate ways and the board dissolves.
Unfortunately, Eric opened a can of worms for me where I really want to build on what he was saying, but I can't figure out how to do that, and this is uncomfortable. I don't usually have this problem. But there's a dimension of this for a new board member where the existing board needs to have, I mean, and this is an assumption I make of our group, that patience as someone comes up to speed. But it's more than patience. It's actually actively helping them ask all the questions that they should be asking, even if they don't know they should ask them. And at the same time, for the new board member, it's never being embarrassed to ask a question. Because if you don't understand something, I don't care how basic it is or how irrelevant it might seem at first, it probably matters. You just don't know why yet.
And I would add to that I love what I'm seeing this board do, bringing Leah on. I wish, looking back at it, that when I was a new board member, I went around and talked to cabinet. I spent time with superintendent. I wish what I had was a feeling that every other board member respected me and was supporting me learning the new role. So I hope that you write this down as some kind of a procedure, a process for onboarding new board members, because I think that's going pretty well.
And so my other one was similar to the focus on results and outcomes, and then also for all the board members to lean into our current governance framework and really work to strengthen that where it needs to be to hold forward.
I think somebody may have said this already, but my next one was a commitment to our agreed upon policies and procedures. I speak for myself too. It's that I need to often remember that as well.
So I'll respectfully point out an inconsistency in what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that, and I'm hearing it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. You all may need to figure that piece out a little bit.
That's interesting. Thanks.
John?
I just wrote one. I'm not a board member, so it feels out of place. But and I think it's been said, but I think this is more explicit. Understand how to operate as an individual board member versus a board, because both roles are the responsibility of boardsmanship, and understanding how that works is important.
My last one is own the culture of our board. This is a group of 5 people. Those 5 people will change, but it's a culture that has its own traditions that get handed on. From the day you arrive to the day you leave, you own a piece of that culture, and you have a major impact on it.
I just have sort of one in general, willingness to engage outside your comfort zone.
No, not right now. I guess there was one, I haven't written it down yet, but I'll say it. I think there's value in each board member having the space and the ability to, this is maybe going off of what John said, the space and the ability to be effective and you know, we all have our individual talents and untalents. So having
Untalents.
and so we have And so we have, I think, just having the space and the ability to be effective, be as effective as we can as individuals too. And that is part of almost a tension too, of there are ways in which we individually can be effective, but also it's important to be effective as a board. But I do think it's important to recognize that providing the space for each individual board member to be effective in their own way. I'll try to capture that.
I would, and building on that, I would say, we don't always agree 100%, but when a vote is taken, we all need to support that vote as a board.
Any closing thoughts? We're 6 minutes over, but I want to make sure we give everybody opportunity to share closing thoughts today. Mark?
Finally came to me. No surprises. I think that goes for all three of the questions, to be quite frank, but no surprises. And then again, that comes back to respect and candid. I don't want to find something out in the newspaper. I don't want to find something out from a neighbor. I want to find it out here if we all know it here. And it goes for whether it's staff, board, what, but no surprises.
And I'm sure that's the same for your superintendent. Yes, exactly. One area where surprises aren't a good thing. Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to go with closing thoughts. Not a waste of my time. So that's high praise. And no, B, this isn't over. The conversations we've started, we got a bunch of things that we got to keep going. And so it's not that at 12:07 we shall stop talking about it.
Thank you for that. Closing thoughts, Cassandra?
I'd say, yes, I think was very useful. Thanks for finally, this is probably the best opportunity we've had in a while to be able to just take some time and dig through this and bring up a lot of good things. I think it's great as we have a new board member coming on board to also have this opportunity. And I would hope in closing that we never got to what our next steps or what our goals might be. I feel like I missed that piece from this, and I don't want to lose that piece going forward.
I agree. I've seen the board interact around the board self-assessment. I think this is my 4th or 5th time. This has been the richest dialogue I think that the board has had, and I think testament to you coming and leading the board and myself through the process was really helpful. So thank you for spending your Saturday as well with us. It's important work. It helps us all become better. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I agree with Siri that I think that there's some ideas floating around that I think we need to bring back and continue to have the discussion. I think that needs to happen sooner than later. Maybe tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. we can all we can all get it. We can all get here again.
7.
Yeah, just keep it all in. But no, I think I don't have an answer for the process yet, but I do think I think there's some ideas. There's an idea of okay, so one of the concepts was what is the role of the board in terms of communication? What does that look like? I feel like that's some sort of subset that we need to continue to have dialogue around. I don't think right now is the time to do that, but I'd like to have that come back, and then maybe there's some outcomes from that. But I don't think we're all quite there yet. I think everyone's flagged that as an issue of. I think that may even been one where there was a rainbow there, and so I think we need to have a little more conversation around that. But there's that. There's a few other things that have just sort of flagged that I think we need to bring back for more focused and frankly maybe even more uncomfortable conversations around. Maybe sometime in the next month or two we can get that going.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you. This was actually very insightful into the members of the board and kind of the thought processes and how you guys work. If anything, I would say that this was more eye-opening than watching months and months of your guys' school board meetings. And so, yeah, it was a great introduction to the board. I'm also really interested in next steps. kind of where we go from here, because I agree with Eric that there have definitely been specific areas that have been brought up that are being called out as, you know, we need to do something about this. And so next steps and goals would be pretty crucial, I think.
To Chris's point, and I think to all the others, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And this is, we've reached a certain point, but now we gotta suck it up and keep on going. And, yeah, that's it.
And Chris, we started with you, correct? Okay, yeah. Enough rounds and I lose track of it. So, yeah, absolutely. There are definitely next steps. This was a down payment in terms of some future work. And so if you could leave your sticky notes on the table for me, I will collect those and make sure that those get itemized in the report that I give back to you. I also took a lot of notes during your conversations around the self-assessment. You can take those and then use them in whatever way is most useful to you. I'll try to identify the areas where it felt to me like you really want to have additional conversations, but I might miss some, so be sure to take some time. And I just want to thank you for inviting me in today. It was a pleasure to get to know each of you, either for the first time or a lot better. Appreciate all of the work that you're doing. So have a great rest of the Saturday.